Welcome to the Full Nelson. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the differences between the Remington 870 and the Mossberg 590. I'm going to tell you guys which of these shotguns I prefer, and I'm also going to give my recommendation to any newcomers who don't currently own a Remington 870 or a Mossberg 590. So the only real advantages I can see with the Remington 870 are that I prefer the trigger on the Remington 870 over the Mossberg 590. Another advantage, or something that some people would like me to know, but I don't really see it as being a huge advantage, is that the receiver on a Remington 870 is steel, while the receiver on a Mossberg 590 is aluminum. I would say the one other advantage that a Remington 870 may have, but I again don't perceive this as being a really big advantage, is the fact that you can mount ghost ring sights clear back here on the gun, and Wilson Combat does things like this. Hickok 45 in one of his videos mentioned that. And on the Mossberg 590, that is where the location of the safety is, so you would have to mount your ghost ring sights up here a little bit further. To me, that is not a big deal at all. I mean, it's just, anyway. But that's something worth noting that some people may say is a major advantage or a reason why they like a Remington 870. Now, to get into the advantages the Mossberg 590 has over the Remington 870. The biggest difference between these two shotguns is the location of the controls. The Remington 870 has the safety here, which is just on the back of the trigger guard, whereas the Mossberg 590 has the safety on top. And you actuate it with your thumb as opposed to your firing finger. Also, the bolt release button or action release button on the Remington 870 is right here in front of the trigger, and you would typically use your trigger finger to actuate that button to run the shotgun. The Mossberg 590 has the action release button behind the trigger, and you would typically release that not with your trigger finger but with your middle finger. So that's the biggest difference between these two shotguns, is the location of the controls. That difference, however, is pretty significant, and I'm going to talk about that why that is a little bit later. So the one other advantage that I want to mention, or a couple advantages for the Mossberg 590, are that it has dual extractors as opposed to one extractor. If you don't know what an extractor is, it's this little piece of metal on the side of the bolt. It's a little hook shape, and it grabs onto the rim of the casing and pulls the casing out of the chamber. Mossberg 590 has dual extractors. It has one on both sides of the bolt. So if you have your shell casing, those hooks are grabbing on both sides of the shell casing to pull it out, whereas the Remington 870 just grabs on one side of the shell casing to pull it out. Only has one extractor. So that's an advantage the Mossberg 590 has. And the last advantage that's worth noting is that the carrier on the Mossberg 590, which is this little piece of metal here, which makes sure that the rounds go from the tube of the shotgun into the chamber of the shotgun. As you pump the shotgun, that carrier moves, the shell falls into the carrier, into this piece of metal, and then when you push it forward, the carrier goes up and the bolt goes forward and pushes the round into the chamber. On the Mossberg 590, the carrier, when the pump is forward, is up and out of the way, which means when you want to top off the shotgun, you don't even have to depress the carrier to top off the shotgun. You can just put the rounds directly in the chamber. Whereas the Remington 870, the carrier is always in the way, and you have to depress it to load it. To me, that's not a big deal. Almost every shotgun on the planet has a carrier of that same type of design where the carrier is in the road like that. And this is slightly better, slightly easier to load, but it's slight enough that I think most people, especially people who have any experience with shotguns, wouldn't find that significant. But a newcomer may find that significant. So those are the major differences between these two shotguns. Now I wanted to talk about the controls again, and why the controls on the shotguns may make a pretty significant difference to some people. So, as I mentioned, all of the controls on the Mossberg 590, the safety is run by your thumb, and the action release button is run by your middle finger, which means your trigger finger is free to be on fire control or free to be ready to pull the trigger at any moment. That is an advantage. You can actuate all the controls on this shotgun and still keep your finger ready to fire. Whereas on the Remington 870, if for some reason you need to open the bolt to get around in the chamber, you're going to have to actuate this button. And while you can actuate it, you could actuate it with your middle finger or any number of fingers. You have to do this weird thing where you move your hand up there and your finger's going to be off fire control while you're doing that. So that's just not going to be as quick. Also, when it comes to the standard safety on a Remington 870, the standard safety on a Remington 870 is small enough that you would have to take your finger and typically your trigger finger to depress the safety, and then you're ready to fire. Whereas with the Mossberg 590, you could just do it with your thumb and keep your finger in the firing position. So that could be a big deal for a newcomer, and that could be a big deal, I suppose, even for a veteran or anybody who's really in a hurry to shoot around and run the other controls on the shotgun. So for me, out of these two shotguns, if you're a newcomer and you currently do not own a pump action shotgun, I would recommend the Mossberg 590. The controls are more ergonomic and easier to use. They're just a better design as far as the controls are concerned. With that said, I prefer the Remington 870. And the biggest reason I prefer it is simply because I have owned this shotgun for forever. I've put so many rounds through Remington 870s, the controls for me are not an issue. I struggle more with the controls on this shotgun than I do with this shotgun because I have used this shotgun or a Remington 870 so much. I'm sure I could probably train and get to where the controls on this would be just fantastic. But for me, if you handed me this shotgun blindfold, I can handle every control, load everything. I could do everything. It's just shotgun piece of cake. And Mossberg, I could probably do that, but I'd have to think about it a little bit. I guess I'm just saying it's simply because this is what I own first is why I prefer it. It's really reliable. I like how the action feels. I like how the trigger feels. I mean, I like everything about the gun. And as far as the location of the controls, I'm just used to them. So it's not that they're better. I think they're actually inferior, as I mentioned. I think the location of these controls is more ergonomic. It's just I'm so used to this, I'd have to completely retrain myself to use this in an emergency situation or self-defense. I'm just ready to go with a Remington 870. Also on this particular 870, one of the things I've done that I do like is you can get these oversized safeties. And with this oversized safety, rather than having to reach and depress it with your finger and then put your finger on the trigger, the safety is so big that you can actually just wrap your finger into the trigger like you're ready to fire, and you can see the safety is sticking out so far it's still contacting my finger. So if I wanted to fire this in a hurry and needed to turn the safety off, I could just go. So I do like that. And I do think that that is a faster design than having to push your thumb and fire. But standard Remington 870s don't come that way. So when it comes to the controls, the Mossberg 590, no doubt it has an advantage over the Remington 870, but there's just a lot of reasons why I prefer it. It's what I'm most used to. I prefer the feel of the action. I like the feel of the trigger better. I mean, there's just a lot of reasons why I prefer my Remington 870. But if you're a newcomer or you don't own one, I'd buy the Mossberg 590 for all the reasons I mentioned. I can see why people love them. I think the control layout is superior. It's just not what I'm accustomed to, and I'm a creature of habit, so I'd stick with this. If you already own a Remington 870 and you're used to using it, it's plenty reliable, just as reliable as a Mossberg 590 or pretty much any other pump action shotgun. So if that's what you're already accustomed to, I would generally suggest that you stick with what you're accustomed to using rather than, if you have 10 years experience using a Remington 870 and you go buy a Mossberg 590, the advantage of the layout of the controls on the 590 may not make up for the fact that you have all of that experience with the Remington 870 that just makes it to where you're really proficient with that particular gun. Or vice versa, if you have a Mossberg 590 and you buy a Remington 870, then you're really going to feel like the controls are just in a really awkward position. It's really going to throw you off. So that's my opinion on these two guns, some of the differences between these two guns. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those in the comment section. Thanks for watching. See ya.